In June 2018, rapper XXXTentacion was shot and killed in a brutal robbery outside a Florida dealership. His death shocked the world. Today, we dive into the tragic events, the investigation, and the aftermath of one of music's most chilling losses. If you're into true crime and want more content like this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. José Dwayne Ricardo Onfroy, better known as XXXTentacion, was born on January 23, 1998, in Plantation, Florida. Raised primarily by his grandmother due to his parents' struggles, his upbringing was marked by instability and hardship. His father was in and out of prison, and his mother, though present in his life, wasn't always able to provide the support he needed. This chaotic environment deeply influenced José from a young age, and he frequently found himself in trouble both at home and in school. From an early age, José showed an interest in music, but his behavior often overshadowed his talents. He was expelled from several schools for violent behavior, including an incident in which he allegedly attacked a student. These early experiences with aggression would later become a defining characteristic of both his personal life and his music career. Despite his troubled youth, XXXTentacion began experimenting with music as a teenager. He first gained attention on the music platform SoundCloud in 2014 with his raw, unfiltered style that blended rap, rock, and heavy emotional themes. His breakout track, Look at Me, in 2016 brought him national attention, showcasing his aggressive delivery and unconventional sound. His music resonated with a new generation of listeners who connected with his brutally honest depictions of pain, anger, and mental health struggles. As his fame grew, so did the controversies surrounding him. XXXTentacion was no stranger to legal issues, with his most notorious case involving domestic violence allegations. He was arrested in 2016 for the alleged assault of his then-pregnant girlfriend, Geneva Ayala, leading to widespread criticism. The graphic details of the case surfaced in court documents, casting a shadow over his career. Despite the allegations, his fan base remained fiercely loyal, often defending him against media scrutiny. XXXTentacion's appeal lay in his authenticity. He openly discussed his struggles with depression, anxiety, and suicidal thoughts, topics that resonated deeply with his audience. His 2017 album 17 became a platform for him to explore these issues, and tracks like Jocelyn Flores and Revenge reflected the emotional turmoil he was going through. His willingness to share his vulnerabilities set him apart from many of his peers in the rap scene, and his fan base, primarily young people, found solace in his openness. In his personal life, XXXTentacion continued to struggle with his mental health, frequently discussing his inner battles on social media. He often spoke about his desire to change and make a positive impact on the world, but his legal issues and violent tendencies created a complicated public image. His second album, released in 2018, further solidified his status as a voice for the misunderstood, dealing with themes of heartbreak, anger, and hope. Despite his legal troubles and controversial public image, XXXTentacion's influence on the music industry and his fan base was undeniable. His raw, emotional delivery, genre-blending style, and ability to speak candidly about mental health resonated with millions, cementing his place as one of the most impactful artists of his generation. However, his troubled past and untimely death would leave behind a complicated legacy that continues to spark debate to this day. On June 18, 2018, XXXTentacion, whose real name was José Onfroy, was going about his day like any other. The 20-year-old rapper had recently been enjoying the success of his music career, with his second album, topping the charts earlier that year. He had a busy schedule that day, and part of his plans included a trip to Riva Motorsports, a popular motorcycle dealership in Deerfield Beach, Florida. XXXTentacion was known to have an interest in high-end cars and motorcycles, and this visit was part of his intent to potentially purchase a bike. That morning, XXXTentacion left his home in Parkland, Florida, driving his black BMW Y8, a luxury sports car that he often used. He was accompanied by a family member, his step-uncle, who was with him throughout the day. Before arriving at the dealership, he made a trip to the bank where he withdrew $50,000 in cash. He placed the money, which he planned to use for the motorcycle purchase, in a Louis Vuitton bag. By around 3:30 p.m., XXXTentacion and his step-uncle arrived at Riva Motorsports, located on North Dixie Highway. Surveillance footage from the dealership shows them entering the store, where they spent a short amount of time browsing the inventory. During their visit, they were noticed by two individuals who had been waiting outside in a dark-colored Dodge Journey SUV. These men, later identified as part of the group involved in the murder, had already been tracking XXXTentacion's movements. At approximately 3:55 p.m., XXXTentacion and his step-uncle exited Riva Motorsports and returned to the BMW parked in the dealership's lot. Unbeknownst to them, the Dodge Journey had repositioned itself to prepare for an ambush. As XXXTentacion sat in the driver's seat ready to leave, the Dodge Journey blocked his vehicle from exiting. Two armed men, Michael Boatwright and Trayvon Newsome, exited the SUV and approached XXXTentacion's car with their weapons drawn. The situation escalated rapidly. The attackers demanded that XXXTentacion hand over the Louis Vuitton bag containing the cash. A brief struggle ensued between XXXTentacion and the assailants as he refused to exit his vehicle or cooperate. In the midst of the altercation, one of the gunmen, Michael Boatwright, opened fire. XXXTentacion was shot multiple times at close range. The attack was over in seconds. The assailants grabbed the Louis Vuitton bag containing the $50,000 in cash and fled the scene in the Dodge Journey. XXXTentacion was left critically wounded in his car, slumped over in the driver's seat. His step-uncle, who had fled during the attack, returned to find the rapper gravely injured. He immediately called 911, and emergency services arrived on the scene shortly after. XXXTentacion was rushed to Broward Health North, a nearby hospital where medical staff attempted to save his life. Unfortunately, the injuries he sustained from the gunshots were too severe, and he was pronounced dead at approximately 5:30 p.m. The news of his murder quickly spread, sending shockwaves through the music world and among his millions of fans. As investigators began piecing together the events of the day, it became clear that the attack had been premeditated. The suspects had been monitoring XXXTentacion's movements and specifically targeted him for the large sum of cash he was carrying. Surveillance footage from Riva Motorsports and other sources helped authorities track down the individuals involved. Within days, multiple arrests were made, leading to the eventual capture and conviction of the men responsible for the robbery and murder. That day marked the tragic end of a life that, despite its controversies, had a profound impact on music and culture. It was a senseless act of violence carried out in broad daylight, and the details of the event still resonate with those who followed XXXTentacion's career and mourned his loss. On the afternoon of June 18, 2018, XXXTentacion was unknowingly heading into a deadly ambush. After finishing his visit to Riva Motorsports in Deerfield Beach, Florida, the rapper returned to his black BMW Y8 parked in the dealership's lot. As he and his step-uncle prepared to leave, they were unaware that two men had been watching their movements. These men, Michael Boatwright and Trayvon Newsome, were part of a group that had planned to rob XXXTentacion after spotting him at the dealership. The suspects had been following him, waiting for the right moment to strike. They were parked nearby in a dark-colored Dodge Journey SUV, ready to initiate their plan. When XXXTentacion began pulling his car out of the parking lot, the SUV abruptly blocked his path, forcing him to stop. Within seconds, Boatwright and Newsome exited the SUV, both armed and wearing masks. They approached XXXTentacion's vehicle, guns drawn, and demanded that he hand over his valuables, specifically targeting a Louis Vuitton bag containing $50,000 in cash that XXXTentacion had withdrawn earlier that day. The situation quickly escalated when the rapper refused to comply, sparking a brief struggle between him and his attackers. During the struggle, Michael Boatwright, identified as the primary shooter, took out his firearm and opened fire. Multiple shots were fired directly into the driver's side of the BMW, striking XXXTentacion several times. The gunfire was fatal. Boatwright and Newsome grabbed the Louis Vuitton bag and quickly fled the scene, jumping back into the Dodge Journey. The robbery had turned into a murder within a matter of seconds, leaving XXXTentacion gravely wounded in his vehicle. As the suspects sped away, bystanders at the dealership were left in shock. XXXTentacion's step-uncle, who had fled the scene during the attack, returned to the car, finding the rapper slumped over and bleeding profusely. He immediately called 911, and within minutes, first responders arrived at the scene. Paramedics worked quickly to stabilize XXXTentacion, who was unresponsive by the time they reached him. He was rushed to Broward Health North, a nearby hospital where medical staff attempted to revive him. Despite their efforts, the injuries he sustained from the gunshot wounds were too severe. At 5:30 p.m., less than 2 hours after the attack, XXXTentacion was pronounced dead. The official cause of death was multiple gunshot wounds which had caused significant trauma and blood loss. The news of his death spread rapidly, with fans and fellow artists reacting in disbelief. A rising star in the music industry, XXXTentacion's life had been cut short in a senseless act of violence. As the investigation into the murder began, authorities would quickly identify and arrest the suspects involved, but the tragic loss of the young artist left a lasting impact on those who followed his career and his music. In the aftermath of XXXTentacion's murder on June 18, 2018, the Broward County Sheriff's Office quickly launched an investigation into the shooting. The initial police response began shortly after the 911 call, reporting the robbery and shooting at Riva Motorsports in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Detectives and crime scene investigators arrived at the scene and immediately began gathering evidence. They collected surveillance footage from the dealership's cameras and interviewed witnesses present at the time of the attack. The footage showed the two armed men who approached XXXTentacion's car, ambushed him, and then fled in a dark-colored Dodge Journey SUV. This footage, along with eyewitness testimony, provided investigators with their first major leads. The surveillance video revealed key details about the suspects and the vehicle used in the crime. As detectives pieced together the timeline, one of their first breakthroughs came just days after the murder. On June 20, 2018, Dedrick Williams, a 22-year-old from Pompano Beach, Florida, was arrested. Williams was identified as the getaway driver of the Dodge Journey and was linked to the crime through surveillance footage. He was also spotted inside Riva Motorsports before the attack, wearing distinctive clothing that matched descriptions from witnesses. After his arrest, Williams was charged with first-degree murder. While Williams's arrest was the first step, investigators knew there were more individuals involved. Their attention soon turned to Michael Boatwright and Trayvon Newsome, the two men seen exiting the SUV and confronting XXXTentacion. As police worked to identify these suspects, they combed through phone records, social media activity, and surveillance footage from surrounding areas to track down the other members of the group. Boatwright, age 22, was identified as the primary shooter. He had a criminal history which helped detectives link him to the case. On July 5, 2018, police arrested Boatwright on unrelated drug charges, and soon after he was officially charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery in connection with XXXTentacion's death. Investigators tied Boatwright to the crime using evidence from phone records and social media activity, which showed that he had been in the area at the time of the murder. Trayvon Newsome, age 20, was identified as the second gunman, who had also approached the vehicle during the robbery. Newsome initially evaded capture, but after a manhunt, he surrendered to authorities on August 7, 2018. Like Boatwright, Newsome was charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery. Another key suspect in the case was Robert Allen, a 22-year-old who played a lesser but significant role in the crime. Allen had been in the Dodge journey with the other suspects, but did not directly participate in the shooting. Nevertheless, investigators believed he was involved in planning the robbery. Allen was arrested on July 26, 2018 in Georgia after going into hiding. He later agreed to cooperate with authorities and provided crucial information that helped strengthen the case against the other suspects. Through further investigation, detectives uncovered that the robbery had been premeditated. Evidence suggested that the suspects had not only followed XXXTentacion from the bank, where he had withdrawn $50,000 in cash, but they had also been monitoring him before his visit to Riva Motorsports. Phone records showed communications between the suspects in the hours leading up to the attack, indicating that the robbery was a coordinated effort and not a random act of violence. As the investigation progressed, several key pieces of evidence emerged. Detectives recovered the Louis Vuitton bag that had been stolen during the robbery, as well as some of the cash taken from XXXTentacion. This was a crucial piece of evidence linking the suspects directly to the crime. Additionally, phone data, including text messages and GPS tracking, placed the suspects in the vicinity of Riva Motorsports at the time of the murder. Social media also played a role in the investigation. In the days following the murder, some of the suspects posted pictures and videos of themselves flashing large sums of money, which investigators believed was part of the stolen cash. This behavior helped law enforcement build a stronger case, as it demonstrated a connection between the robbery and the individuals involved. The thoroughness of the investigation, combined with witness testimonies, surveillance footage, phone records, and social media evidence, allowed authorities to build a solid case against all four suspects. Each was charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery. Their arrest brought some closure to the tragic murder of XXXTentacion, though the case continued to captivate public attention as the legal proceedings unfolded. Following the arrests of Dedrick Williams, Michael Boatwright, Trayvon Newsome, and Robert Allen in the summer of 2018, the legal process surrounding the murder of XXXTentacion began to unfold. Each suspect faced serious charges, with all four individuals ultimately being charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery. The legal proceedings were long and complex, taking several years to reach a resolution, as the case captured widespread media attention due to the high-profile nature of the victim. The timeline of arrests started with Dedrick Williams, the first to be apprehended. On June 20, 2018, just 2 days after the murder, Williams was arrested in Pompano Beach, Florida, based on surveillance footage and witness descriptions linking him to the crime. He was identified as the driver of the Dodge Journey, the vehicle used in the ambush. Williams was charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery, marking the beginning of a series of arrests. Shortly after, on July 5, 2018, Michael Boatwright was arrested on unrelated drug charges but was soon linked to the murder of XXXTentacion. Boatwright, who was identified as the primary shooter, was charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery. His role in the crime was confirmed through forensic evidence, phone records, and witness testimony. Investigators also found social media posts from Boatwright showing large amounts of cash, believed to be part of the money stolen during the robbery. Robert Allen, another participant in the crime, was arrested on July 26, 2018 in Georgia. Allen, though not one of the shooters, was present in the Dodge Journey during the robbery and played a key role in orchestrating the attack. He too was charged with first-degree murder and armed robbery. Allen later cooperated with authorities, offering testimony against the other suspects, which would prove critical in the trial. The final arrest occurred on August 7, 2018. when Trayvon Newsome, the second gunman, surrendered to authorities after evading capture for several weeks. Newsome, like the others, faced charges of first-degree murder and armed robbery. With all four suspects now in custody, the case moved forward to the court hearings and eventual trial. The legal proceedings for the case began with preliminary hearings, where the prosecution laid out the charges against the four men. All faced charges of first-degree murder, which carries a mandatory life sentence in Florida if convicted, as well as armed robbery. The prosecution built its case on a combination of key evidence, including surveillance footage from Riva Motorsports, phone records placing the suspects at the scene, and the recovery of the stolen Louis Vuitton bag and cash. One of the most important elements of the trial was the testimony of Robert Allen, who agreed to a plea deal in exchange for a reduced sentence. Allen provided critical details about the planning of the robbery and the roles of each participant, solidifying the case against Boatwright, Newsome, and Williams. Allen's cooperation with the prosecution was a significant factor in securing convictions for the other defendants. Throughout the trial, which began in late 2022, the prosecution presented a range of evidence to prove the premeditated nature of the crime. This included surveillance footage showing the suspects following XXXTentacion, phone records that captured their communications in the lead-up to the murder, and the recovered items taken during the robbery. Testimony from witnesses at Riva Motorsports also corroborated the timeline of events and further solidified the involvement of the suspects. The defense attorneys for each suspect tried to argue against the prosecution's claims, with some attempting to shift the blame or downplay their client's involvement. However, the overwhelming evidence, including Allen's testimony and the physical evidence tying the suspects to the crime, made it difficult for the defense to counter the charges. In 2023, the trial reached its conclusion. After several months of proceedings, a jury found Dedrick Williams, Michael Boatwright, and Trayvon Newsome guilty of first-degree murder and armed robbery. The verdict came as no surprise given the strength of the prosecution's case. The judge sentenced all three men to life in prison without the possibility of parole, the mandatory sentence for first-degree murder under Florida law. Robert Allen, having cooperated with the prosecution, received a reduced sentence but was still held accountable for his involvement in the crime. The conviction of the three primary suspects brought a degree of closure to the case, though the murder of XXXTentacion left a lasting impact on his fans, the music industry, and those involved in the trial. The legal proceedings underscored the senseless nature of the crime, a planned robbery that spiraled into a tragic murder, cutting short the life of a young artist with immense potential. Though the trials and legal processes were long and complex, the outcome affirmed the justice system's ability to bring those responsible to account. As of 2023, the three men responsible for the death of XXXTentacion are serving life sentences, ensuring they will spend the rest of their lives behind bars. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more true crime stories, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We've got plenty more content coming your way, so stay tuned.